صباح الخير
Good
جميعا.
morning, everybody, and thank you for attending that session with us. We are on the third day, and I am sure that you are tired after 2 days of intensive sessions. First of all, I would like to thank the speakers that are present with us. Yara Al-Rafa'i from the researchers at the Jordan Open Source Association. Haneen Al-Diri also, and Khulud Shkakwa from Danish Institute for Human Rights, and Mona Al-Bur, Mina Gender and Media Development Advisor, IMS. In 2020, we were discussing the TG TFGBV. Amr Ahmed was assisting us in translating localization, and also the different colleagues. I will start with the first question addressed to Mona and the need to develop this glossary and what kind of gaps this glossary was trying to bridge. We have certain speakers in the English and language, and also others with Arabic language. We have interpretation service available.
I'll respond to the question on the need on two levels. The first level relates to the broader picture and purpose of developing a dedicated glossary, which is to foster a more inclusive and safer digital space as part of the growing momentum and crescendo of diverse voices who are, over the past years, working on raising awareness of the urgency of the problem. The problem being that online harm is real. Online violence is a form of violence and it's gendered. It's tech facilitated. It's a threat to the safety of journalists. It's a threat to users of digital spaces from various intersecting perspectives, whether racist, sexist, or ableist, for example. And the second level of responding to the question of why there was a need to develop a glossary relates to the idea that you cannot tackle a problem without naming it, without understanding its different types and forms. And for that, there was a need to work on a shared language or a shared space for meaning. Especially as tech continues to evolve at the speed that it is, and with the speed or advent of artificial intelligence, for example, in our daily digital lives. The need to remain in tune with the evolving discourse was clear. Shall I jump to a specific gap that we aim to address?
Yes.
Thank you. Broadly, a knowledge gap. Specifically a gap relating to localized knowledge and resources relating to tech-facilitated gender-based violence. Another gap that propelled a need to develop a glossary are gaps in legislation across various frameworks and contexts relating to tech-facilitated gender-based violence. As we are a diverse, multidisciplinary group, the particular gap that I can say that we aim to address from media perspective, media development, is in relation to content production. The gap of editorial tools or resources on the topic that can serve newsrooms when reporting or investigating on tech-facilitated gender-based violence, a localized glossary on the various forms of violence can be used as a knowledge resource. And secondly, in relation to safety, while there could be various policies and procedures to protect against online harm, a gap could be in relation to further understanding those harms and how to protect journalists, for example, against abusive audiences, how to foster psychological safety in newsrooms by being aware of those harms. So just to conclude, my main 2 points are online harm is real, online violence is violence, and language matters, words matter.
شكرا منى. رح أنتقل من اللي كانت عم
Thank you,
تحكي.
Mona. I shall move from what was mentioned by Mona, and to what extent we needed to develop this glossary. And we are going to move to Yara because she was working a great deal on developing this glossary. What kind of methodology that was followed in order to develop the first version of the glossary? In the current time, and we are following that methodology and developing the glossary. We wanted to take into consideration that it will not only bridge the gap in Jordan, but will also assist bridging the gaps in the whole region. The methodology which we have adopted in order to develop that glossary, we have taken two steps in our research. The first one, it is to revise the different literatures, reports, researches about uh, technologic facilitated gender-based violence in Arabic and in English. Those researchers were, whether they were from Jordan or from other countries around the world, we did go over those literature and important terms related to online violence or TFGBV. And the second step was the translation and localization, the translation of the different terminology in an accurate way that is in line with the cultural narrative in Jordan and the region. There were many terms. It was extremely important to focus on them, how we are going to translate them, whether into Arabic or vice versa, into English. And at the same time, these were bridging a gap in the research because there were many terms which did not focus on in our region and that they represent violence. This was what we noticed through the translation and research. Thank you, Yara. I just would like to draw your attention that now we have a QR code, and this QR code will take you directly to the glossary. And from here, I would like to ask another question to Yara. While you are opening the glossary, if Yara, you can tell us what are the most important categories and the groups you were putting into the glossary and the main terms that exist in the glossary. Well, of course, we had to divide the glossary into different categories in order to make it easier for the people to find certain terms. Or at the same time, understand what do these terms indicate. For example, we have the category of forms of violence. The forms of violence include terms that indicate certain types of violence, such as online harassment. What is online harassment? We have a term and the source from where that term came in Arabic and in English. And also we have the photographic abuse or the visual tools used. And we wanted to focus on that category because we have found that there are different types of abuse and violence which the women are subject to in the Arab world and around the world. The visual material, we have videos, we have photos, and different visual material, and also the use of the new technology, which is AI. And for example, the publication of intimate photos without consent. This is one of the terms that exist in that category. And there is one important term which we have noticed, which is the revenge, and there is one whole category about sexual harassment over the internet. And because there were a lot of harassment over the internet, we have decided to dedicate one whole category about this kind of violence. For example, sexual exploitation or extortion, and coercion, for example, hate speech. Also, what is hate speech? This is a quite vague term. It is difficult to determine, and this is also a big problem which we have faced in terms of research and in terms of translating it. Another important category is the technology and data, how technology and data can enter into TFGBV. Among these, digital surveillance and the stalking, and a new one, which is the shadow banning. This is also a type of violence we need to mention. I also would like to draw your attention that the glossary, in addition to all the terms that Yara did mention, is part of 170 other terms. And for the categories you have mentioned too, but these are 11 categories. This is why we ask you to look at the glossary and to browse it. And this will take me to another question addressed to Haneen. And this question is about who are the people or the stakeholders that will be using this glossary or interested in utilizing this glossary. And at the same time, how would they use it in their work and in their daily life?
The glossary is supposed to be used by everyone, by all stakeholders, by everyone in the community. It's accessible by everyone to everyone, but it can help institutions providing legal support in describing certain cases, especially survivors when especially if they fear describing their situation or what they've been subjected to. It eases the dialogue between them and the service provider, for example, by using certain terminologies that can describe their situations without getting too personal or getting into the details of their circumstances, so they feel heard and protected at the same time while getting the support they needed. Also, it could be useful for other researchers, presentations, anyone who needs it as a reference for technology-facilitated gender-based violence.
شكراً.
Thank you.
شكراً حنين. في أي حدا من المشاركين برضه بحب يكون عم بنوه أو بيعطي مثال كيف ممكن؟
Any other speaker would like to give us an example how this glossary could be utilized, whether we're talking about a journalist or civil society organizations?
أكيد. May I add, thank you, to supplement that, it could be a very valuable resource to investigate this issue, to have this glossary. So it's one of the target groups are also journalists, reporters, writers who are investigating online harm. So to have the discourse, the tools of the language that is up to date with these forms could be very valuable.
Okay. شكرا منى.
Thank you, Mona.
كل حدا ممكن يكون عم بيستخدم الموقع.
Well, at the end of the day, everybody can use that glossary, because I remember when we were children, we had the Oxford Dictionary. We used to look at it and learn from it, and the purpose was educational, and we used to refer to it at any time when whether we were at school and we had homework or we wanted to learn something on our own. This is at the level that we want to learn. But when it is related to violence, I believe that the glossary will be the Qibla of different organizations, institutions, media outlets, everybody that uses it in its daily work and try to combat the cases of TFGBV. Khulud, I would like to ask you about the challenges. You as a partner representing the Danish Institute and a supporter for the glossary. And at the same time, you were with us during the focus group discussions. We did hold what challenges we were facing, and also the challenges we might be facing during the next period of time.
I will respond in English. First of all, let me say that the Danish Institute for Human Rights, we are the national human rights institution and funded under Paris, and we promote and protect human rights in the countries we work in. And I would say that for the Danish Institute also, again, we believe that harm is harm. And the glossary work is important in the sense that, where you need to understand the terms that are used in the civic space. So understanding it, and naming it actually is part of understanding, the concepts and the terms. And I think it's important for everyone also to be introduced to these terms, because we usually, in the lines of work, we usually encounter and hear these terms. So, having them in this glossary, being able to introduce also as part of everyone's work new terminologies maybe, and suggest new terminologies is really important. As when it comes to the challenges, for example, I can give a small example to one of the challenges, which is the fact of how the work on TFGBV can be inclusive and accessible for people with disabilities. This is really an important issue, and I think throughout the focus groups that JOSA was conducting also to introduce these terms, this issue has been raised by several people and several institutions and national institutions as well, civil society. The fact that the glossary or any work needs to be inclusive, which brings us back to, and it could be also a message to everyone in the room or somebody watching us online, is that once people start working on projects that are related to the TFGBV, it is really important to focus on the inclusive budget. So this is really, I think this is one of the challenges. I'm sure there's more, but due to the time restriction, I will not go to more. But we take the opportunity also to say thank you to our partners from IMS, and also that we will continue the support for this good work of JOSA as well. So thank you for that.
شكراً خلود. في حدا من المشاركين برضه بحب يكون عم بحكي على التحديات.
Anyone else would like to talk about the challenges? Maybe Yara, when you were working on developing the glossary, translation, localization, and how we were receiving the feedback and the different remarks on the terms through the different focus groups. Of course, we have faced tremendous challenges in developing this glossary, and in particular, when it became real and how we are going to disseminate and publish that glossary and what kind of tools will be utilized for that purpose. And from that point of view, because the glossary refers to TFGBV, it includes some difficult terms and heavy ones, and because it refers to violence, it wouldn't be easy to any association or any researcher to publish such kind of terms. But we are at a time when violence is real and the digital violence is being translated on the ground. And so there was a need to develop a similar product. Yes, this was among the challenges. And like we have said, we also faced challenges in the translation. Many of those terms were in English. and the users of technology and the users of the internet, they have developed those kind of terms. So it was extremely difficult for us to know how this could be translated into the Arabic language, or if it was a legal term. There were many legal terms indicating violence, or we felt that this could be interpreted in a wider manner and to be more inclusive. To include different categories. That was extremely difficult, and these terms we use them in our work, and like Ms. Mona has said, when we name violence, we need to use the right terms. And when we write the report and use the right terminology, this will help us recognize that there is a problem and recognize that violence exists in itself, and will help us solve that problem. And I really wish at the end of the day that this glossary will be of a benefit to all the people. And at the end of the day, it is a collective effort by Joseph, and it is an open source for all the people to utilize it and take it, and maybe also amend it or modify it and provide us with the feedback. Yara, maybe the last point you have mentioned will take me to the last point of our session. And I wouldn't say that it is a challenge we might be facing, but this is something that we take into consideration, and we feel that we are responsible because we were the first that were developing that glossary, and how the glossary will remain there. It will always be updated and will include any new terminology or definitions. We know that, for example, certain terminology has a certain definition, and that definition might change later on. Now, all these changes, it is important to take them into consideration, and this is something that make us be careful on how we can keep that glossary a living document. And Yara, like you have said, because it is a collective effort, like I have said, now we have the first version of this glossary, and we have opened the floor for a recommendation and feedback from all the stakeholders, all the individuals, the people that are expert in that field, and anyone that feels that has the knowledge and the capacity to help us. There will be a QR code for feedback, so that when you are browsing the glossary, if you feel certain things need to be corrected, or if you have a recommendation, or if there are terms that are not included in the glossary, I talk on behalf of JOSA and the supporters of the glossary. We really appreciate those efforts, and we really are seeking your help. Now, the glossary in its first version might move to become a second version that will take into consideration the region in a wider manner and more accurate manner. At the same time, if there were certain terminologies that were not included in the research and you draw attention to them, that will be excellent. This link will be always open for any feedback and recommendation until the end of the month, 31st of December. But It will be published again. After that, we take the recommendation into consideration. There will be a second version of the glossary, and it will be shared with all our colleagues in order to disseminate that version among the maximum number of people possible. And also, in order to keep the glossary a living document, at the end of the glossary, there will be another link to other recommendation, terminology, definitions that have been updated or have been changed in order to take that into consideration and keep the glossary up to date.
With that, we have reached the end of this session. I thank my colleagues. If you have anything that you would like to add before we open the floor for our colleagues for questions, and if there are any questions online, we encourage any questions. We are ready to respond.
شكرا كثير على المعجم وعلى الجلسة.
Thank you for this session. I had a question. Is it the most important glossary for documenting the violence against women or gender-based violence? And is there a new behavior that you have added as a type of violation based on the nature of women and the victims, and if it was in Jordan or this question came when we try to describe the violations that are falling on the people on the area or the women in the area, especially on the means of social media. We find the difficulty to be able to describe what is a violation, because a violation on a woman in Jordan or Syria, on Egypt, or any countries of the region, it's a violation where it is a normal behavior in other places. And the last question, and I'm sorry for taking a long time, is this glossary that I hope that it's a more of a guideline rather than a glossary. Would it have a plan, or would it have a step later so that we can communicate with the means of social media to adopt these violations that are falling on women or on the inhabitants of the region, so that they are actual violations, and therefore it will be easy to handle them or remove them. Thank you.
شكرا.
Khulud, would you like to respond?
I will respond to the question of the glossary and the monitoring of violations. For the glossary work, it is mainly just mapping the terminologies, so it has nothing to do with mapping, meaning it's just the terminologies, it's not the violations. This is what it is. What would be interesting also is to let everyone know that the glossary is an output within a pipeline where the Danish Institute and also IMS are supporting for JOSA's work. So we started last year with JOSA, supporting JOSA to map, do a legislative mapping for TFGBV legislations in Jordan. So meaning whatever legislation that have direct impact on the TFGBV work in Jordan. So it is, again, it's an output among outputs that has been done and supported, but also upcoming definitely work to be, ahead of within the pipeline. So yes, and an answer is just terminologies, but it's also important, as we have said on the panel also, you need to be able to name the terms to use it, to understand it. So again, is the next step, what do you do with these terms? It could be, for educational purposes, it could be for research work, it could also be used when you do the advocacy work. And so there's a lot of purposes depending on how do you intend to use these terms once you agree, or at least add your own terminologies based on the experiences you have within your different work you do.
شكرا خلود. احنا وصلنا
Thank you, Khulud. We have reached the end of this session, and I want to conclude with a response to two questions on online. That is, the glossary is published, and it was the QR code is published. If we can put it again, so that our colleague online can take a screenshot, so that they will keep it, and at the same time, there's a link. So that the recommendations are posted. So the glossary has a vast numbers of words, but it does not have the mechanism if the person was subjected to violence, how is it handled, and perhaps this is among the recommendations, Mr. Abdulrahman, if you can put it in the link. Thank you a lot. Thank you for being with us today in this session. And thank you for ARIJ that have opened the floor for us to do the session today. Thank you.
شكراً.